Adam back in with the RV Returners. So now Opus 8 is approaching. So we got some, the full set has been spoiled, so we're going to go ahead and start doing our set review. This time we're going to do it a little bit differently, I guess. We're going to actually give some actual ratings out of 5. Probably rate it in a few different categories. So I guess we're going to kick it off with Fire today. Hopefully they're going to... Yeah, hopefully this time they don't, get boned, but we'll look at each card individually and see if we like them or not. All right, so first up, we got Archangel HM. I believe this was spoiled the fanfare.
Long time ago.
Yeah, and people were kind of going a little nutty over it. So it's a Final Fantasy 11, 3 CP, 6K. If he deals damage to your opponent, he deals double damage instead, and when he attacks, he gains 3,000 power until end of turn.
I think the card's fine. I think it's really neat that he essentially has double strike when he's hitting you in the face. I really don't know. I think he can be an effective card, but I just don't know where he belongs. I don't know what Fire's identity is looking at now. I don't know what you think as well.
I mean, I like the card still. I mean, I still think that it has a pretty good amount of answers to it, but with the upside of the fact that you're killing your opponent faster, I guess. I don't like that he's odd costed. I feel like that's kind of a big part that holds him back for me. I think it in the faster fire decks, they want stuff to be even costed. Yeah. So it's kind of awkward that he costs 3. But I think he could work in a mono fire deck. Outside of that, I'm not too terribly sure.
Yeah, I feel like you want to haste this guy for sure.
Yeah, so I guess we'll give him a star rating, right? So we'll do standard and then title. So out of 5 standard, what do you think?
Maybe a 3. I think he's good. There are a lot of answers for him, but I just don't know where he's going to see play.
Yeah, I'm right around a 3 too. I think his play. Well, he'll only see play really in mono fire, in my opinion. And then what about in title? How you feel about him in title?
I think 11 needs all the help they can get, and the fact that you can play this guy, Volker will say somebody can't block, and that could just be enough for you to swing through and win the game for 2.
Yeah. So what do you think out of 5?
In title, because 11 needs all the help they can get, I think this guy's a 4 in title.
Yeah, I'd probably say a 4 as well. Just because of basically the reasons that you said.
Yep.
Not really much more.
Yep.
So next up, we got Red Mage. It's a 2 CP standard unit backup, category 14. When it enters the field, choose 1 fire forward. Until end of turn, it gains haste and brave.
I think it's fine in mono fire decks, obviously, because it is limited to fire forwards. Overall, I don't see this replacing Sage anytime soon if you're looking for that haste, but it's fine.
What's your ranking out of 5, you think?
Oh, out of 5? I'll probably give this a 2.
Yeah, I think my issue is Sage is just a better card.
Yep.
Most of the time I really don't care about the Brave. In my opinion, Brave is probably one of the weaker keywords. Sometimes it's good, but most of the time it's whatever. Like Samurai, for example. I'm not really playing Samurai because it gives Brave. I'm playing Samurai because it boosts my power.
Yep.
And so for this, I'm really just playing it for the more haste, I guess. And
at that point, you're just playing Sage.
Yeah, so it's really, if you really want Sages 4, 5, and 6, I guess. But the problem is it's fire restricted. So I'll probably going to be a little harsh on this. I'll probably say a 1.
No, that's fine. That's very fair.
And then what do you think in title?
Oh, it's a 0 because it's not a Scion.
Yeah, I think it's a 0. Yeah, and it's still restricted to fire in that category as well, which doesn't have much going on.
Correct.
As far as title's concerned. So yeah, probably a 0 too, sadly. All right, so next up we got our first fire summon. It's a 4 CP Ifrit. It's an EX burst, category 11. Choose 1 forward, deal at 4,000 damage. 1,000 damage for 1,000 damage more for each fire backup you control.
Man, another Ifrit, another disappointment. I don't think there's any reason to play this one over. If you're looking for a 4 CP EX burst Ifrit, you're better off just playing the one from Opus 7. I just don't think this one's any good. I give it a hard 1.
Yeah, so I'm somewhere between a 2 and a 3, honestly. Only because I think in mono fire it's okay. I'm not saying it's great, and it has to be a slower mono fire deck, really.
Absolutely.
This only gets value off 5 backups because even off 4 backups you're only dealing with AK, and that just feels so stupidly bad.
Exactly.
I don't know why this thing couldn't have just said 5k plus 1k, but I mean
that would have been too good for fire.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, if you could play this off 5 backups, it's pretty good. And really, I think the only place you're really playing this is probably mono fire, because it's not a really good K2 into target in general. So, I mean, it might not even see play at all, but I'll give it a 2.
Yeah.
What about in title?
In title, it's a 1 because, well, no, in 11 they have a lot of fire backup, so, and they need summon, so maybe a 3, maybe I'd say a 2. I'd give it a 2 because I don't know if they have enough fire backups to really warrant killing something.
Yeah, it seems like they're giving 11 summons finally, but they're not really good title summons. I think that's the thing.
They're all super color restricted.
Yeah, so I'm gonna give this a 1. I almost think you'd rather just not play this and play another card. It doesn't even have to be a summon, you know.
Yep, makes sense.
Next card's a Roha. She's another 11 card. 3 CP, 7k, Job Samurai. If a fire character you control deals damage to a forward, the damage increases by 1,000. And then for dull, choose one forward, deal it 1,000.
I think the card's kind of neat. I know one of the starter cards has something to do with samurais and damage, so this could be fun. I love the art, first of all. All of this Mobius art we got in this set is really, really solid. I guess all the Mobius art in general is just really good. I think the card's fine. I would probably give it like a 2 as far as playability goes, because I think you just need to you need to have a deck that kind of builds around it, but there's other things in Fire that kind of do the same thing this does. So
yeah, I think it's pretty average to me. Did you give it a star rating? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I said 2.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a 2.
So I'd probably a tiny bit higher. I'll probably say a 3. Just because it can do some cool stuff, I guess. It does affect backup and monster damage too, if that ends up being a thing. You can combo this with the Palom, I guess, if you want like a 2k buff and then a 1k buff for your opponent's stuff. If you're really trying to like trade up or just make stuff deal more damage. But other than that, yeah, it's pretty medium, I think. So I'm going to say a 3. What about title?
I think in title it's another at least a 3, because again it's another 11 body that makes Volker even better, and that damage, the damage boost could potentially be enough to get you over some of the bigger guys and some of the other titles. Yeah,
for sure. It just sucks that it's only fire characters, so even in title that still restricts you. So I'll probably go a little bit lower in title and say 2, just because there's less you can do with it in title. But I do think 11 does need help, so it'll probably see play. Just I don't think it's that great. Like, it's not going to be hard to replace later down the road, I think, in a title deck. Next up, we got Edgar. So this is our spoiler. So
good card.
2 CP, Final Fantasy VI backup, fire. Tap, choose one category, 6 forward, or you control, and it gains 1,000 power to its turn.
I think this card's excellent, and I think it's because he has become a catalyst in a lot of the... what am I trying to say here? He makes the Fire Ice 6 strategy better, because now you can fix your colors off of Setzer, and then you're always threatening that 1k bigger on your guys. I personally think that this card is I would almost give it a 5 out of 5 if it wasn't just... I mean, obviously it's only going in one type of deck, and that is a 6-heavy deck, and that's the only reason it's not getting a 5 out of 5. I think this card just really... It enables... Locke to just start doing stuff off of backups more consistently. He can always do it off of Terra and Banana Sid, but I think now in the deck you're primarily using him in, your colors are fixed, and you can just play him without having to worry about playing the Setzer or the Celis or even the Sabin or, whatever. Good card. Just absolute good card across the board.
Yeah, somewhere between a 4 and a 5, too, basically for all those reasons. I think the biggest thing is it lets Setzer color fix now. But the really the biggest thing is that Locke can be played off of 2 backups and make you discard and still have the 7k body threatening an 8k body the next turn. I think Locke really benefits the most from this card, as well as just it'll make 6 stronger in general.
Well, even Setzer too, right? Because you can play turn 1 backup, Setzer, search for Edgar, play Edgar, and now you've got Setzer, and potentially next turn you can swing in with him, threatening 8k. Or you can just have that defender threatening 8k to kill something or trade with something and then dull and freeze something else. So I think it's just a great tempo play, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I mean I think it's pretty good with Setzer, but I think Locke is really like the
100%
the big winner from this card. which just sucks because Edgar, it's not Sabin that's becoming, the winner from this card. But
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's good. I think if Fire Ice becomes really good again, it'll be because of this card.
Yep, I agree with that.
At least in this set.
Yep.
So yeah, I'll probably say 4, leaning toward 5, but only because it only really goes in one deck.
Yeah, but with that being said, it is a 5 out of 5 in title.
Yeah,
all cards like this for every category are perfect cards for those categories.
Yeah, in title it's definitely a 5 for sure.
Yep.
Next up we got Cloud. So he's the first legend. 5 CP EX burst, category 7 job soldier. You know the whole deal. 9k power. So his EX burst is when he enters the field, choose 1 forward opponent controls, deal at 3,000 damage. Plus 1,000 more for each point of damage you received, and then when he's put from the field to the break zone, you may remove the top 10 cards of your deck from the game. If you do so, return Cloud to the field duel.
I actually really like this card. He's very much like the fire equivalent of the Opus V legendary Cecil. And I like the fact that, kind of near the end of the game, if you're at 5 or 6 points of damage, you play this guy, you're killing something, it becomes like a legit blocker or something, and you trade, it dies, it comes back, it kills something else. I think the longer the game goes and the deeper in the damage hole you are, the better he gets. But I think overall he's a good card, and I could easily see him in play in Fire X decks, Fire Earth, Fire Earth, Fire Ice, whatever. It's just a 1 or 2 of at the top of the curve, and the burst is fantastic as well. So I probably give it honestly, I think I give it a 3 out of 5. I think it's playable. Just you don't need a whole lot of them to be effective, and he doesn't go in every deck.
Yeah, I'm probably somewhere between a 3 and a 4. I think for me, he's just red Cecil, and Cecil's a good card, so this can't really be bad in my mind. His category is relevant, if assuming that a deck one day becomes pretty good again with 7 cards in standard. But yeah, the problem is I don't know how many decks are gonna really be effectively splashing fire and then also running this. That's where I'm kind of hung up on it, sadly. Yep. But as a card itself, I do think it's pretty strong. So I'll probably go 4, just because I do think it's like I said, it's a red Cecil, and Cecil's a strong card. So I think this is a strong card.
Yep, I agree with that.
And even then, I think he's better in some points of the game where Cecil is not.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%.
And then also his target doesn't require to be dull. It is worthy to note that there is a ruling that if you have less than 10 cards in your deck, you cannot remove all your cards to bring them back.
Interesting.
So you have to have 10 or more cards in your deck. Yeah, you have to be able to remove 10 cards.
Okay, good to know.
And then in title, I guess I'll just continue on from there. In title, I think he's probably a 4-ish. I mean, his name is good in there because I could play a bunch of clouds. He's S fodder for the other clouds. So I think he's pretty solid, but I think there are other clouds that are better in title.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he's a 4. His name carries him. The fact that he's a burst carries him. And, things like that are good in title. So, yeah, I think he's a 4 out of 5.
Yeah. All right, so next up we got Black Mage. It's a 2 CP backup, standard unit. 2 fire, dull, put it in the break zone, choose a fire summon in your break zone, add to your hand.
Card's good. Every element seems like they're getting this card. Scholar got one, I believe, in Opus 6. Or Earth got Scholar in Opus 6, I believe, and now other elements are starting to get their own recycle a summon out of their break zone. I think the card's absolutely fine. I think it makes a great one-of in fire decks where, being able to get back Phoenixes or Bahamuts, or even maybe a Belias in a pinch for that first strike, I think is really, really strong. I think in standard, it just sucks because red cards, they're kind of naturally going to be lower just because they're red. But honestly, I give all of these type of cards for each element. I think they're a good solid 4 out of 5 because I think if you're playing a mono-colored deck, there's no reason not to run one of these in that deck.
Yeah, so what's your rating out of 5?
4. I give it a 4.
Okay, so I'm a little bit lower than that. I'm probably somewhere between a 2 and a 3. I'm going to go with 2 just to be a little bit opposite of you.
Sure.
So my only reasoning for that is Earth. The reason I think the Earth Scholar is good is because Earth summons are just more toolboxy by nature and just better in more situations. Whereas a lot of fire summons tend to do the same thing. I do think your point about Belias, though, is valid. I think Belias is probably the best thing for this to grab. Maybe an H Phoenix. But the problem is grabbing an H Phoenix with this card in the decks that play H Phoenix. You don't really want to break your backups unless you're winning the game, probably.
Exactly.
And then the other issue with grabbing the big Phoenix is if this guy's your 5th backup and you break it, and you pitch a card from hand to break it, now you're on 4 backups, and casting Phoenix that turn is awkward. So it just like, for instance, like a Heka or a Cockatrice, those are like really easy to cast and get them back the same turn. There's not a lot of good fire summons that you can get back with this and then cast efficiently the same turn. I think Belias is the best example, though. So that's kind of why I'm on a 2 and why I'm not thinking it's that great. But it does something that's decent, you know. And I do think there's some merit to it. And maybe as we see more fire summons down the line, it could get better.
Yep. And in title, it's a 0. I just don't think there's any reason to play this in a Tactics Advanced deck. Just there's really no summons to get back.
Yeah, I don't even think they have summons yet. So, yeah. So it's definitely a 0.
Yep.
Next up is Golem. So 1 CP Crystal Chronicles monster. When it enters the field, choose 1 forward. It gains 2,000 power to end the turn. Put it in the break zone. Choose an attacking forward. It gains 4,000 power to end the turn.
Card's fine. I don't really see it seeing much play in standard. I give it a pretty hard 1. I think it does neat things. I believe when we talked about it on our podcast, it's like a reverse Tonberry essentially. But again, these fire monsters, I don't think you're making room in a deck for this one in particular. I don't know. I just don't see it yet. So I'm giving it a hard 1.
Yeah, I'm beside with you on the 1 there. I don't think it's going to see much play. It's not completely awful, though. Like, I'm really just giving it on a 1 off power scale just because I don't think it's going to see play. But you could do some tricky stuff with it. I just think there's better ways for you to increase your power and develop more stuff onto the board rather than spend CP and a card in your deck on this card.
Yep, I agree with that 100%. And in title, I think it's a 0 because I don't really think you're playing. Well, I'm going to take that back. Crystal Chronicles title has really been developed in the last couple sets, so it might actually be pretty playable. And if you're playing a Crystal Chronicles title deck, I'd probably give it. Now that I really stop myself here, probably a 2 or a 3.
Yeah, probably somewhere around there. Just because they don't have summons, right? So like. Exactly. They gotta play some kind of tricky stuff, and this is really all they got.
They have Yuri. They're good to go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, outside of that, right? Like.
Yeah.
All right. Next up is Samurai. It's a 3 CP, 7K standard unit, category 14. If you've received 3 points of damage or more, it gains Brave. If you've received 5 points of damage or more, it gains 1,000 power.
Not really much to say here. I don't really see it seeing any play in standard. This is like one of those like limited filler cards where. You're really using this to kind of just fill out your forwards in your limited deck. I think it's just in standard. I think it's a 1.
Yeah,
really much going on here.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna go with a 1 too. I think Ayame is a better card. I know some people think that this might be slightly better than her. I think I think she actually has more upside than this card, and the fact that she's category 11 matters. Yep. The fact that this is category 14 actually doesn't matter at all. The only text on this that even maybe redeems it is standard unit.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm not a fan. I don't think it's going to see play, so I'm going to say a 1 as well.
Yep, and it's a hard 0 in title because it's not a Scion.
Yeah, again, I don't think this is seeing play. And unless somehow like Hien becomes some samurai thing and there's more samurais printed, but we'll get to him later. I don't see it, though. But,
yeah, I don't either.
Next up is, I'm disappointed in this card, too. So it's Amarant. He's a 7 CP, 7K. EX Burst, category 9. Says EX Burst is when he enters the field, select 1 of 2. Choose a forward, deal at 7K. Choose 1 monster, cost 3 or less. Opponent controls, break it.
I have to look at this card as you're playing a 4 CP 8K and you're casting a Brynhildr. And even then, I'm just kind of like, he only cost this much because he's red, and I hate that. Fire finally gets an answer to bigger monsters, or at least one bigger. But I don't know. The fact that it's on a 7 CP body is just it's too much. Will this card see play in the Water Fire 9 aggro deck? I mean, maybe I could see it as maybe a 1 of. I mean, the burst is nice. The burst is really, really nice. But I really don't see you ever casting this thing unless you're like, well, they got a 7K on the board. I guess I'll just do this and win the game. But I don't know. I'm going to give it a 2 with an asterisk just because I think it has a home in that deck. And, I love the art. I love Amano art. But I don't see this card really seeing much play.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 1.
Mhm.
I think it's just not good. I think it's one. I think the damage that it does on entry is 1k short of what it probably should do.
Mhm.
I think the EX burst spiked up the cost by way too much.
Correct.
And then it's not really efficiently killing monsters of 3 or more. I mean, granted, yeah, it gives you something that Fire didn't have access to because Zell before was really your only answer for 2 or less.
Mm-hmm.
But like, we have to really see how many people are playing these 3 or more costed monsters.
Oh, it's 3 or less. It doesn't hit 4 or bigger.
You're right. Yeah, I'm sorry. 3. So that's even worse.
Yep.
So it basically only hits the cost 3 stuff that Zell can't hit, and it's a burst
like
with it. That's
Malboro and like Death Gaze.
Yeah. So I'm not seeing it. I'm gonna say it's a 1.
Yep.
The burst does not redeem it. I think it probably should have costed 6, or
It's at
maybe
6. I think we're in business.
6. I think I could argue for it. I think at 5 it's really good.
Yep.
But yeah, it's. I mean, I think 7 cost really holds it back. And then what do you think in title?
I think in title it's great. 9 needs all the help they can get, and I think this set they definitely got it. The fact that this is another, because their summons, they don't really. Well, up until now, they didn't really have many summons, but I think this helps because it can hurt monsters, which is good in the mirror match. I think this card's going to be a mirror breaker personally. And 7K could be good. I think it's fine in title. I'll give it a 3 for title.
Yeah, I'll say a 3 as well, just because I do feel like some of these monsters are going to see play in title, and there's not a lot of monster answers in title, and so having that, maybe it might be worth the cost of 7. The 7K is probably not going to kill much, and that's kind of sad. But he might see plays like a 1 or 2 of, but that's about it.
Yeah, I can see it as a 1 of, for sure.
Next up is Sid, Final Fantasy Legends. He's a backup. When he enters the field, choose 1/4, deal at 5k. If you have 5 or more fire backups, deal at 8k instead. I
think this card's fine. It's like a worse Irvine if you're not playing mono. In mono fire, I think it's fine as a good 1 of, because it's a backup that's going to do 8k damage typically when you play it, or sometimes the 5k is just enough. I give it a solid 2.
Yeah, I'll say it. I'm gonna go to a 1. I'm gonna say a 1 just because I think Irvine's a better card. It's just better at like all points of the game, and Irvine doesn't see that much play. Like, not that Irvine's bad. I think he suffers because he's red. But like, this is only dealing more damage than Irvine, and it's only hitting 8k. Like, why couldn't he be 9? I don't know. I mean, 8k is like kind of a magic number, but like, I feel like if I'm at 5, it should do 9 or something.
Yeah.
And it's only good in mono. So, I mean, maybe in mono you're gonna play it as like a 1 or 2 of over Irvine, but like every other deck that runs fire that needs like extra ping damage that at 3 CP is just gonna play Irvine.
Yep.
Even Black Waltz might be better, which is sad to me.
That's a bold statement.
So yeah, I'm gonna say a 1.
Okay.
And
title, I don't know. I'm just gonna give it a 1 for now because Legends is really kind of coming into its own. And because I don't think there's not really enough fire backups to really get more than the 5k, and in title 5k just doesn't cut it.
Yeah, I'm gonna say 1 just for the same reasons. I just think he's gonna be really subpar there, and you're never gonna have 5 of the same element backups in title. You're just not.
Yep, I agree with that.
Next up is Xenos. He's a 4 CP 8k category 14. If your opponent controls any Job Warrior of Light forwards, he gains 2,000 power, haste, and brave. And then when he deals damage to your opponent, choose 1 forward opponent controls, deal at 5k.
I think this card's really neat. Obviously, with Warriors of Light being really big last set, and they could potentially still be big in this set, I think he's got a home in decks that are obviously running fire cards. But if Warriors of Light are a big part of the meta, which they potentially could be, there's so much happening right now; it's pretty wide open. I think he'd see play. Otherwise, I'm gonna give him a 2 just because I think he's just very specific.
Yeah,
but, the dealing 5k to something is not terrible when he does damage.
Yeah, I had some like kind of janky ideas, and I'll probably play around with him for fun. But as like a serious card, yeah, I'm probably somewhere between a 1 or a 2.
Yeah.
I'll go with 2 just because I do think Warrior of Light will still see some semblance of play, and maybe he'll be an interesting tech choice. And then he has the plus on the end too of dealing the 5k, but I don't think that alone even would make him see play. I think it's just really hard to see play, and he's still slow, right? Well, he's slow if they don't have Warriors of Light, I guess. I mean, and he's basically just a vanilla card if they don't, which is kind of sad.
Exactly.
In
title, it's a 0 because he's not a Scion.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to see play in title. In title, the job matters even less. So,
it's true.
All right, next we got Warrior. It's a 2 CP standard unit, category 14, 5k for 1 fire. If Warrior deals damage to a forward this turn, increase the damage by 2k instead.
I like this card a little bit. It's a 2 CP forward, so it immediately plays good with Godot. So it could potentially trade up with a 9k if you've got Godot out, just for the cost of itself and the 1 fire. I don't know. I think because, there are just better 2-drops in fire, I don't think it'll see play. I mean, but I don't even think it'll see play in like a Golbez list. There's just nothing. I've kind of talked myself out of it. I'll go ahead and give it a 1.
Yeah, I also think it's a 1. I think there are better 2 CPs to play with Godot, even just in fire alone.
Yep.
And that are just going to passively be bigger than this instead of having to dump CP into something. In a deck, we're going to have trouble dumping CP.
Correct.
So yeah, and then in title, it's probably a 0.
It's not a sign.
Yeah, it's just. I mean, it's not really contributing to the Scion planner. It's not doing anything that a Scion probably can't do better. So.
Yep, I agree.
All right, next up is Duncan. It's a second legendary. It's a 4 CP AK category 6 job monk. You may use Duncan's special ability by discarding card named Sabin instead of card named Duncan as part of the cost. When he enters the field, choose 1 forward of cost 4 or less opponent controls, deal it 4,000. And then for Phantom Rush for S and tap, choose a forward, deal it damage equal to Duncan's power.
All right, so I've got a lot to say about this card, obviously. I like it personally because I love the art. It might be my favorite art in the set. And obviously it's a Final Fantasy VI character, so I'm going to be immediately biased. But I think as a standard card, it's probably a hard 1 at 2 at best. And the only reason I say that is because it does really, to be its best, you have to be playing Sabin, which as much as it kills me to say it, Sabin just isn't that good right now. But if you're playing like a Fire Ice 6 deck, kind of like an older style, like an Opus 4, Opus 5 list, this guy just kind of slides right into the spot that Heroic Furion was in. And he does do a lot of things for that deck. And again, this is like the positive. This is why I can go as high as a 2 on him. Because, he does do exactly what Furion did. He comes in and does 4K to something, which combos with, Sid Reigns, Laswell, Vivi, Irvine, Celis when she attacks. So he's still doing all of that stuff that Furion was doing. But also he can interact with the rest of the deck. He can enable lock if you play lock after this guy. He can be buffed by Edgar. The fact that Sabins are able to kind of do double duty in your hand. But because he is limited by that, I really can't go higher than a 2. And I do like his special. I really wish his special was maybe just like straight break something, because Fire would have really, really benefited from something like that. And plus, I think it would have made him more of a worthy legendary. But I do. So I'm giving him a 2 in standard. In title, I'm actually going to give him a 4 out of 5, just because he combos well with Celis. He'll have Brave just because of cards like Scion, and the fact that you've got 6 other Sabins, so he'll be doing some damage. Because 6 doesn't have summons, he's a great piece of removal in the deck.
Yeah,
this has been my TED Talk.
Yeah, I'm gonna give him a 1 in standard. For basically kind of a lot of the reasons that you said. I think if Sabin ever becomes good, I could up him to a 2. Like if Sabin becomes like really good again. I wish his S was just like that he didn't have to dull. Like he could S and attack or something.
Yeah,
I'd be okay with that. His ability's a little bit more limited than Furion, but not really by much. Like he can only hit 4 or less, but you're not really. Most of the time, you're not comboing on stuff that costs higher than that anyways to damage kill him. But maybe it might come into play, which would be another negative for him, sadly. And in title, I think he's probably a 4. For the reasons you said, they don't have a lot of access to a lot of other stuff to mess with their opponent during their turn. And you're probably playing 6 Sabin there, so you got a lot of S fodder.
Yep. I really think he could have been a legitimate contender if it was S tap break forward your opponent controls.
Yeah,
we'd be in business.
Sure. Yeah, I just don't think they like giving that stuff to Fire, is what it seems.
They don't,
like,
and
so.
I think it would have been just a much needed tool for Fire.
Next up is Bahamut. It's a 4 CP summon. This was, I think, like the first card we saw. It was either this or Cloud. It's category special, which can now be played in title, so we can rate it title. You can only pay with CP produced by backups to cast Bahamut. Choose on 4, deal it 10,000 damage if it's put from the field into the break zone, or move it from the game instead.
I think the card's okay. The fact that you can play it off of Minwoo and K-Tuna is pretty primo. But I don't know if you're playing this over the Opus 4 Bahamut, because I don't think the extra 1,000 damage or 2,000 if you play it off of K-Tuna really makes that much of a difference. So I'll probably give it for standard, I'll give it a 2. For title, I'll give it a 5 out of 5 because you can play it in any title deck now.
Yeah, so yeah, for me, for standard, I'm gonna give it a 1, just because I think I still would rather play the other Bahamut, because even though I'm fetching this off K-Tuna to play it, I'm never probably gonna cast it otherwise. The other one, at least, I have opportunity to cast if I draw it. In title, yeah, I'll give it a 4, just because you can play it and everything, and it gives 6 access to summons. So I think 6 might play it, but it's still very slow in title. Next up is Vivi. He's a 1 CP 2K, category 9. When Vivi enters the field, choose on 4 opponent controls, deal it 2,000 damage. If you control 4 or more category 9 characters, deal it 7,000. If you control 7 or more category 9 characters, deal it 10,000.
I keep hearing a lot of mixed things about this card. I think for 1 CP in the right deck, he can do a lot. I think, obviously, it goes back to kind of like how I was thinking about Amarant. Like, you're playing this guy in that fire, water, 9 aggro archetype that feels really, really pushed in this set. I think he's good there. I'm giving him I want to say 3, just because I think when you play him for 1 CP, potentially doing 7,000 damage, which I feel like you're going to do most of the time, I think he's worth the 1 CP you have to pay. So I'm going to give him a 3 for standard. For title, I think this guy's a 5 out of 5 for that deck, because you're always putting 10,000 on something when you play him. And he's S fodder for the other VV if you need to use that. So I think he's okay. Yeah,
for standard, I'm going to go a little lower. I'm going to say 2, just because I do think even in that aggro deck, 4 might be a little hard to hit consistently, depending on how fast you're going. And I don't know how many 9 backups you're going to be playing, because I think in order for him to consistently hit that, you're probably going to have to be on 2 9 backups.
Yeah, and I think you'll get that with, like, Artemisian and Ico.
Sure, yeah. I mean, but then what's your fire backup at that point, you know? Like, you want to...
Do they even have one?
Well, you have to play this guy off a fire backup, otherwise he's kind of inefficient. That's kind of...
Do they have a fire backup for Category 9?
I'm sure they do. I have to think of it. They might not, though. Yeah. They might not. But yeah, so I'm going to go 2, just because I think it is going to be a little bit harder to get the 7K off than you would like. And in standard, you're definitely not getting the 10K.
Oh, no.
Unless you're on some dedicated 9 deck that's going to be slower. And even then, like, at that point, I don't know why you're running this card. But in title, yeah. In title, he's a 1 CP spell.
Yeah, he's a 5 out of 5 in title, 100%.
So, yeah, I'll give him a 5 in title as well. I think he's a stellar title card. Next up, we have Brynhildr. It's a reprint.
Yeah.
So we'll just move on from that, because there's no really point to cover. It's a good summon. It's good for limited, I guess, but there's no reason to rate it. It's a shame card.
Yep. Moving along.
Next up is Marsh. It's a 4 CP EX Burst, Tactics Advance 1, 5K. EX Burst, when he enters the field, reveal the top 5 cards of your deck, add 1 fire character among them to your hand, and put the other on the bottom in any order.
Hey, man, you start on this one, because I know you've been excited about this card.
Yeah, I like it. Man, I want to rate it a 4. I'm gonna say a 4. I'm gonna say a 4, just because I think he is good. I think the only reason I would go 3 is because he's red.
Yeah, that sucks, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I'm gonna say a 4, because I do think if you're playing Mono Fire, even Fire X, where you're trying to look for certain fire cards, he's gonna be really good. The fact that he's burst is just like a cherry on top. His body isn't the best, but like he's getting you a card, so he's essentially on curve, right?
Yep.
He reminds me a lot of kind of like Porum, but more specific, and he doesn't have the kind of lingering ability, so he's not quite as good as Porum. But I mean, I guess that's kind of par for the course when you're a red card.
Yeah.
But I like it a lot. I think in Mono Fire, it's a no-brainer. I think you're playing this card. Basically gives you a card no matter what.
Yep.
And then
the card gives you a chump blocker.
Yeah, and then even if you're playing like a Fire X deck and like half your deck's Fire, it's probably getting you a card every time.
Mm-hmm.
The only downside is you have to reveal. So I'm gonna say 4, and then in title, I'll say 2. I don't think Tax Advance 1 is a good title deck, anyways. I don't think this really helps them in any way, but maybe getting like Mont Blancs and stuff might help, which is another reason he's better in Standard. He might make that card better as well. So.
Yep, same. In Standard, I'll give him a 3 in Standard, and again, just because he is a red card, and you do have to play primarily red cards. But I think I think the fact that you are, like you said, you're playing the card, you're getting a card, and then you've got a chump blocker if need be. So I think he does enough to warrant at least being, played in Fire decks. And in title, I'm giving him a 1 just because Tactics Advance 1 is just not a good title to play.
Yep. Next up, we got Sabin. It's a 2 CP 5K, Category 6, Job Monk. When he attacks, choose 1/4, deal it 2K. If you control Edgar, deal it 4K instead.
This card's a hard 1 in Standard because he has to put the 2K on something, whether it's yours or not. And if you're playing Sabin at all, there is 0 reason in Standard to play this one over the Legendary. In title, I think he's fine. In title, I think he's at least a 3, just because he's just a lot of S fodder, not just for him, but also for Duncan. And that's actually one thing I will say. I actually like this card in Limited because you can, that's my dog barking. Because if you draft Duncan, or if you pull Duncan and you pull a couple of this guy, you've actually got yourself a nice little package there with Duncan. So I think in Standard, he's a hard 1. In title, he's a 3. I could ramble all day about 6 cards, but I'm almost stopped myself there.
Yeah, I'll just agree with you 100%. I think I'm exactly the same. I think he's a 1 in Standard. I think he's not going to see play. I think there's better 2-drops to run with Godot. I think there's better stuff to run in a Cat 6 deck. And then in title, yeah, he's good fodder for Duncan, good fodder for the other Sabin, and you can have them all out at the same time. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'll go 1 and a 3 as well. Next up is Yatu. It's a 2 CP Fire backup, Category 14. For Fire, Dull, choose a forward, cost 5 or less. It cannot block this turn.
Card's good. I think it's going to start seeing. You're going to start seeing this in place of Red Mage because, especially in like Fire X decks, because while it misses anything that's 5 or bigger, there's not really much that you're worried about that's bigger than 5. That's not like normal sized. Arden maybe is the only one you're really worried about, but like you can tap this. Say that thing can't block, then just break it to say Arden can't block. But we'll talk about him later. But I think the card's good. The fact that it's cheaper and it's going to hit most relevant things that say they can't block, you're in good shape. I like the card a lot. I think in Constructed, I'm giving it a 3 because it's red. In title, it's not a Scion, so it's a 0.
Yeah, I think in Constructed, I'll give it a 4 for most of the reasons that you said. I think that it will be I think it might become a staple Fire backup. Yeah. Just because it's more efficient than Red Mage. And then I think for whatever you can't hit her with, you just play Ninja and you hit those things.
Yep.
In title, I think her problem is there's not enough Fire stuff for her to be efficient. But if there was, I think she might be able to see play.
Sure.
So I'll say
that.
I'll say a 2 just because maybe if they print more 14 Fire stuff that actually helps Scions in the title deck, she might like slot in. But other than that, I think it's hard to like efficiently use her right now. Next up is Rain. He's a 3 CP 7K Brave Exvius Job Knight. When he enters the field or attacks, choose 1 forward. You may pay 1 Fire. If you do so, deal it 3,000 damage.
I think he's fine. I think his job is relevant. I think he has a neat, very Fire-esque kind of ability. But I feel like if you're paying 4 to put damage on something, you're almost just better off. Or if you're paying 3 to put damage on something, you're better off just playing Vivi. And if you're paying that 4 to put something on him, you're playing like a worse Furion or even like Duncan at that point. But I do think the fact that you can keep using that ability when he attacks is really, really good. It could really allow him to trade up in certain decks. And if you have ways to like give him like First Strike or something, I think you might be in business.
Yeah, I think he's pretty solid too. Did you give him a number, by the way?
Oh yeah, I'll give him a 2. Yeah, I'll give him a 2.
Okay, I'll say he's a 3. I'll say he's slightly better than a 2. I think in certain decks where like you could combo with his ping damage, it could be pretty cool. Essentially, you could play him as a 4 CP, 7K that deals 3K to something on entry, which is pretty decent. But yeah, I mean, a lot of those things are kind of meh, so it's not the best. But maybe if you could combo that in conjunction with other things consistently, like maybe if you're playing him plus Celis or something. But the problem is that falls just like 1K short of where I want to be. I think that's the only issue.
Exactly.
But you know, maybe his job becomes relevant in Fire, but I'm not sure yet. But it could be worth trying. So I think he's a solid 3. And then in Title, I don't think you can play Brave Exvius yet. But maybe with this set,
think you can either.
Yeah, maybe with this set
so,
you can.
And I know I was being a lot harsher on the 14 cards because they're not Scions, and I'm giving other things that don't really have established title decks like 1 or 2. I think when Brave Exvius becomes a title deck, I think he'll be like a 2 or a 3. So right now I'm just going to give him a 1, and we'll leave it there because I think if you are braving a Brave Exvius title deck, you're playing this guy.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll agree with that. Next up is the last of the non-starter fire cards, and that's Lava Spider. So it's a 1 CP Crystal Chronicles monster. The attacking forward you control gain plus 3,000 power.
I think this card's okay. Obviously, you and I have had a lot of words about this card. I think outside of like dedicated weenie decks, I don't think this card sees play. I think it's a. I'm gonna give it a 2 just because I think it does make weenie decks pretty crazy. Because it just allows their guys to at least trade with bigger things. But otherwise, I think the card's kind of a trap. So, and Title, I think in Title maybe it could see play, but again, Crystal Chronicles is something that's still kind of unexplored. So for now, I'll give it like a 2 there and a 1 in Standard.
Okay, I'll bump it up to a 2 in Standard just because I do think, like with weenie decks, it could see play, but I do think you're not just slotting this into every fire deck or even a deck like where you just want it. Maybe in Scions, maybe. But it has to go in a deck where you just don't care if your stuff dies after it trades up.
Right.
I think that's the big thing. It is really good with First Strike if you can do things with that, but then we're talking about like adding more cards on top of it. I mean, I know it only costs 1, but still having more cards and not having ways to put cards back in your hand, like, I don't really like the idea. So I'll give it a 2. In Title, I'll actually say a 3 just because I feel like this could allow Crystal Chronicles to swing into those big guys that it otherwise might have problems with because Yuri's not able to target a lot in Title. So
yeah, that's true. So
being able to swing, you know, maybe your Chelinka is now a 10K threatening to deal 11K, you know, that could be okay.
Could be good.
But other than that, yeah, not much to be said. All right, so first of the starter cards is Gosetsu. He's an EX Burst. When he enters the field, you may search for 1 card named Hien or 1 card named Yugiri and add it to your hand. And he's a 3 CP.
I mean, obviously, he's an EX Burst, which is always good, and obviously he's tethered to how good those 2 forwards are, any version of them. So I think he's a card that I don't know we'll see if it'll see a bunch of play. So I guess in Standard, I'm just going to give it a 1 just because I think he's tethered to those 2 forwards in particular. But that number could change. And obviously in Title, he's not a Scion, so we're going to stick with the 0.
Yeah, I'm going to give him a 1 too. It would have been dope if he said search your deck for a Job Samurai or a Job Ninja. Or, you know, card name, you know, one or the other. I think that would have been way cooler. I think he would have been more open to like see play. But I mean, these are the 2 people he interacts with in the game, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say a 1. I don't think it's gonna see much play, and then yeah, in Title, I think it's a 0 because I don't think you're playing those cards in Title. Maybe Yukiri sees play in Title, maybe, but I don't think so. But maybe she's borderline, but we could talk about her at a later one. Next up is Hien. He's a 4 CP AK category 14 Job Samurai. If you control a Job Samurai other than Hien, he gains 1,000 power and Brave. And when a Job Samurai forward you control attacks, all forwards you control gain 1,000 power until end of turn.
I think he's a cool card. Obviously, he's tethered to this Samurai tribal that could eventually be a thing. And I think it would be really, really cool because it seems like when he attacks, if any Samurai attacks, you can keep stacking that buff. So if you attack with like 1 Samurai, the next one's going to be plus 1,000. If that Samurai attacks, the next one's going to be plus 1,000. You know what I mean? Like you can just keep getting your guys bigger as you kind of waterfall down. So I think that's neat, but I mean, that's, you know, not right now. So I think right now he's a 1 in Standard. And again, in Title, unless we start seeing more samurais, he's a 0.
Yeah, and also because he says job, then he'll never be able to catch an actual standard unit samurai, which kind of sucks.
I know, that's a shame.
So he's kind of limited to like Ayame. I think a Roha's a samurai, like stuff like that. So there's not many things. So I'm gonna give him a 1 right now too. But yeah, I think in the future you could look back at him if they print more job samurais, and yeah, you could get that cascade effect going on. And then yeah, in title I'll give him a 0 again, just because there's not enough samurais in 14 title either. So I don't really see how you're gonna make it work. Just run more scions.
Yep.
And then the last starter card is Lise. We saw her pretty early on too. She's a 3CP 7K, Cat 14. She is a Scion. You cannot play Lise or a card named Yida while already in control of either character. The forwards you control, or the forwards other than Lise you control, gain 1,000 power. If you receive 5 points of damage or more, the forwards you control gain plus 2,000 power instead. And then she has a S, Dragon Kick, S tap. Choose a forward, deal at 8,000 damage.
I think the card's fine. I think the fact that it is just kind of a, just an anthem on a body that is a Phoenix target is okay. I don't really know how much play it'll see. I do think late in the game that 2,000 power could be pretty swingy, but I feel like it's a little too situational. To me, just that extra buff feels kind of like how when Jet comes in from the last set, he puts a point of damage on the board, but then does nothing else. I don't know. I like to think she would see play because I do think that extra power could be good. But I think for standard, I'm just gonna give her a 2 because she could potentially see play, and she is kind of at that sweet spot where she is a Phoenix target. In title, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to give her a 0 because Yida is like your primary beater. While this card is a Scion, you can't play her with your primary attacker in the deck, and I think that is super crippling. So, no reason to play her in title.
Yeah, so I'm going to give her a 3 in standard. I think there's a possibility for some Fire X deck for her to be decent if you're just trying to get bigger. The 5 points of damage thing is pretty cool because it does include herself.
Yep.
So she basically becomes a 9K at 5 points of damage for 3, which is pretty good. The S is just kind of like a cherry thing. Like, I don't think much of it at all. It's just like kind of there if I draw an extra copy of her and I want to do 8,000 or something. And yeah, and she's one of the few like Phoenix targets that you can kind of do something different with right now. We don't really have that. Like, I guess you can kind of Phoenix in a Roha that we went over earlier to make your thing trade up by 1,000, but this kind of does that too, but it's better later maybe, and it's also better if you're like maybe running Earth as well, like Tahaka and stuff like that. But even then, I guess you're still doing 1,000, but your trade is less likely. Exactly. And then at 5 points, I think she's pretty good. She's really good at 5, I think. But I still, I'm not sure yet. So I'm gonna stay at a 3. In title, I'll say a 1, just because there's some possibility where at some point one day she might be good. If there's other reasons not to play Yida, but yeah, right now I think Yida's the main reason you're playing that title deck outside of like Nidhogg and a few other things. So yeah, I don't really see this seeing much play.
Yeah.
So that's all the fire cards. I was super pumped early on, but now I'm kind of like leaning back into, red cards again. I don't know what they're going to do, sadly.
Yeah, I agree with you. It seemed like early on Fire was going to have a new identity with like really putting your opponent on a clock, especially after seeing how Mono Fire and just Fire in general played in Opus VII. Yeah, outside of like a couple like cards that really just play to my bias, because obviously I love Final Fantasy VI. I don't really think there's much here to be excited about, and that's unfortunate. Maybe in the future, I think as far as cards that could potentially get better, I think Hien and any kind of like Samurais could potentially be better in the future, but they're going to need a lot more to really catch my attention, or anybody's attention for that matter. But I think Edgar, if I had to pick like one fire card that I think is probably the most impactful all around, is probably Edgar, just because he makes other good cards relevant again, and he triggers stuff on those good cards. And yeah, so overall, I think as an element in this set, Fire's probably a 2.
Yeah, probably right around there too. Maybe I'll say a 3 just because I think it's okay, but I'm just kind of like, I thought they were going to give it a little bit more power in some areas it didn't have, and it didn't really seem like they gave it too much in those areas. Yeah. I am kind of glad that our spoiler is the one that might be the most impactful in the set, though. That makes me kind of happy. But
yeah, I agree. He's a good card. I think he's just a really good card. All those cards that allow category, especially when you have a category that actually is pretty powerful, like six cards haven't gone anywhere. Well, they may have fallen off a little bit, but people are still playing them. And I think that card could be the catalyst to make Fire Ice great again. Not Duncan, unfortunately.
Yeah, so that's it for Fire. We'll be back next time with Ice.
Yeah.
So
appreciate it, guys.
See you later.